Brother in the back, yes. Stand up and speak as loud as you can.
Peace, brother. I didn't get your name.
Brother Ali, peace.
I want to comment on something you just said. Myself and Brother True, who was speaking yesterday about when brothers like you all speak, the masses of us, a lot of us aren't going to get what you say. Whether it's we get it now, or we comprehend it later, or we just never get it, right? Now, you just made the point that it's important for us to know our names in order to understand who we are, so we can have a critical thinking mind and affect our people. And then you also said that if all this stuff can't help us change, then it's useless. Understanding that all of us aren't going to, like, we're not going to listen to what you said necessarily and say, oh, my brother's right, I want to be that, I'm going to call myself this. We're not going to hear what Brother True Islam is saying and say, oh, okay, Matthew Prophet Muhammad is God, etc. Some of us will, some of us won't. If we don't get that critical thinking mind, is that to say that we won't be able to come together? If that's not the case, and we can, how do we do it despite the fact that we have divergent thoughts and come together and lift ourselves up?
You directed it
I'm asking you that because you made the point.
Okay. I can go back to the first question of the student enrollment. And the question is, who is the original man? And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, according to what I've heard from Minister Farrakhan, has said that he could write volumes on that one question. As far as the names that we use, if we understand out of our original mind that these are just different aspects of history of the original man, then it kind of dissolves the differences that divide us and enhances our ability to appreciate each epoch of our history. That doesn't take rocket science to understand that. I think it takes a simplicity of communication from enough teachers who can communicate it that way to produce the unity. And secondly, the critical thinking mind is most necessary for us to change. And whoever is not going to be a critical thinker, they're not going to use the body and the capacity that they have as a human being. So in respect to being a critical thinker, being a critical thinker doesn't mean you have to be able to elaborate on things like we're talking about. Being a critical thinker is asking a question and using information properly to allocate it for a purpose that's functional, as opposed to just saying, etc. So when I say nationality and birthrights, I'm talking about how do we approach the economic program of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? How we approach the things that Prophet Noble Jew Ali said in a useful manner? How do we come together and do constructive things in our different societies? And I have examples from our society, but if I'm getting on your question in some way, I hope I'm answering it. Go ahead, you have something.
I'm sorry, I wasn't but you made the point that Elijah Muhammad said that he could write volumes on who is the original man. I agree with that. I read that. I came under the teaching of Elijah Muhammad. It made sense to me. My family doesn't make sense to it. So it's not rocket science, but it doesn't make sense to everybody. And my point is, how do we come together? How do I get my family members? We look in here, there are many M.G.Cs. This place should be packed. It should be standing room only. All right? And it's definitely a bereft of sisters. So how do we get them? I'm sorry, I'm not making a man. I'm just making a point that how do we go out there and get them, despite the fact that they may not see the rocket science, they may not see this. How do we go about the process of building our nation up, regardless?
The same way that you got the information when you were mentally dead. Somebody came to you with truth and it sparked something in you because truth is your nature. So despite the fact that your family shows resistance, we are gods, we have the power to resist. But the truth itself is the antidote, and your job is only to deliver it and then to be an example of it. Go ahead, Brother Bourne.
I have a question for True Islam. In your encounters in dealing with the Islamic scholars, people who proclaim to be Islamic scholars in Detroit and in other places, what are their arguments against the things that you just demonstrated to us? What are their arguments against those things?
Oh, they don't know anything about that. they are familiar with other aspects of my work. My demonstrating that, for example, the God of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not a spook. He was a man. The point number 12, we believe Allah came to us in the person of a man, Master Farad Muhammad. It's not un-Islamic. It was consistent, is consistent with what Prophet Muhammad himself spoke. Now, they don't like that. Understandably so, but this is a new day. And I advance these claims on the basis of my engagement of the classical Arabic tradition. See, those scholars were, for the time being, the gatekeepers of the classical Arabic tradition, and because we were locked out and denied access because we had a deference toward the tradition and didn't want to delve into the Arabic, they presented the tradition to us in the world and convinced us and the world that what Muhammad taught, Master Farad Muhammad taught, was anti-Islam. But by Allah's grace, I got around the gatekeepers, got access to the tradition. And so my work, my published writings are based on the classical Arabic tradition. I show from the Sunnah, it's not true Islam who said Prophet Muhammad's God is a man. It's hadith in Bukhari, a Muslim, where the Holy Prophet describes God in Arabic as a shaks. And I have Lisan al-Arab, the most important Arabic lexicon. So I know what shaks is. You know, a shaks by which Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, described his God, Allah. Shaks is a man with a body. It's a corporeal being. It's a bodily being. It's a person with a body. Prophet Muhammad's God was a person with a physical body. So if your God is a non-person and it lacks a body, and you call yourself a Muslim, then you don't have the God of Prophet Muhammad. So the discussion is always, to the extent that it happens, let's focus on the Arabic, which is where they always like to go because that's always where they used to win and win quickly because we just couldn't go there with them. That's right. But now the conversations are relatively quick, but the outcome is significantly different. Yes, sir. So.
Good. Take the brother.
Assalamu alaikum to the whole family.
I don't know if
First, I want to commend you brothers. How y'all doing? I want to commend you two brothers on being so progressive in Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings and bringing it up to date and making it relevant. A question that I have is that often in the circles of the FOI and study groups, when it's talked about the conception of Jesus and the Immaculate Conception, the brothers often don't want to refer to Mary receiving Jesus without the assistance of a man, and might use the ayat that refers to Mary being greeted by an angel in a well-shaped form of a man. And with the teachings that you were given tonight, talking about Allah creating himself out of darkness, how is it that we're not able to accept the possibility of an Immaculate Conception with maybe Jesus being created in the womb without intercourse?
one?
That's open to the whole house.
Interestingly, the Quran, it doesn't really teach the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. It says, Mary says to the angel, well, you know, how can I have a son? I've not been touched. The response is, you know, it's just easy for God. I say be and it is. And we assume that means that that's it. But see, kun fire kun, the Arabic construction that fa, be, fa, and it is, that fa implies duration. Time has elapsed and something has happened to make be the imperative, the future imperative, become is the present tense. So the command is given, be, time happens and something happens during that time to bring the command into fruition. That's the point of kun fayakun, because Mary is the only one whose child was introduced by that language. But we know that the others had a father. So it's not necessarily that conceptually we can't conceive of self-creation, except that the time during which Allah created himself, the circumstances, the morphic circumstances in particular, are not what they are today. Morphically, today, God wants to reproduce himself. God has to do it through a woman. Because morphically, the circumstances require. And so the Quran actually doesn't teach the Immaculate Conception. It's suggestive and ambiguous in its language and not read closely in the context of other relevant passages. Muslims have, I don't know, as maybe an outreach to Christians, accepted that interpretation, but it is not so. So, again, now Brother Ali may add something to it. From my perspective, it's not the self-creation of Jesus. It's conceptually, well, yeah, it is conceptually a problem. Because morphically, it just doesn't happen like that. Not today.
I'll add something to that. Just on outside of the biblical standpoint, biologically, when you're looking at the man and the woman and the zygote, there are particular sequences of genes that have been identified that show that it would be possible, or possibly was possible at some point in human history, but because the zygotes, of course, have the chromosome count separated at this particular point, it makes it impossible. If a woman could do what we call parthenogenesis, it would be something that would not last in the womb, because the chromosome count is not the appropriate amount of energy to conceive a child. However, in our ancient past, in certain records, there is discussion on that, and I'll point you to a book. I have it. This is a good book that discusses it, the biochemistry of parthenogenesis and studies on it. It's called The Greatest Story Never Told. It's by Lana Cantrell. And she has a section where she discusses that scientifically in light of ancient traditions, But I agree Quranically that there has been misperception created by scholars who misinterpret certain words, but it's just not there in that particular instance.
My question is in reference to the term Asiatic. We know that Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in that same question answer, number one, was the original man. He referred to the original man as the Asiatic black man. How would you, either one of y'all can answer this question, how would you explain that in the context of brothers who may argue about the term more or argue about other terms in reference to our identity? How would you argue that term Asiatic black man? How would you argue call us Asiatic?
With every term, we have to use it and understand it in its proper context. No, and with most terms, they are proper in one context and improper in another context. You know, for example, this age-old question is Allah or God a Muslim? Well, depending on how we understand Muslim, no, he isn't. In that context, Muslim is inapplicable to Allah. But in other contexts and understanding Muslim, it's very applicable. So the point I'm making is context is important. So with Asiatic, it is irresponsible for us to just throw the terminology around without giving its proper context, lest we allow hearers to assume we are self-identifying with the 1 billion folk in China. That we are running from a quote-unquote African root out of self and embracing an Asian root out of self-hatred. So in that context, Asiatic, it's inapplicable. But Asiatic, as Honorable Elijah Muhammad used it, was nothing of the sort. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, of course, used Asia to denote the planet. And in that context, Asiatic is, from my perspective, a most applicable term to us because it busts us out of the African Kemetic restraint. See, the fact of the matter is, all over the planet Earth, the original people were black. In India, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, Australia, all over the planet.
Europe.
In Europe, the Grimaldis of Europe were black. The whole planet was populated by black people. And at one point, the planet was called Asia. So in that sense, we are Asiatic. We are global. And I think that's preferable as an antidote, one, to this these pyramidians running around. We want to take everything back to Kemet. Kemet is a part of our divine landscape, but it's only one holy land in our divine landscape. That's right. And we should not be so eager to pigeonhole ourselves into any one area. Don't let, India, studying India is popular now. And our folks want to say, no, everything began in Indus Valley civilization, in this, in this, that. Now, all of it is ours, and all of it is to be respected, and the best catch-all term is Asiatic. Understanding Asia to refer to not the continent Asia, but the planet Asia. So in that context, Asiatic is an appropriate designation for us. And I'm not one, you mentioned it, and I'll let Brother Ali take it further. Asiatic versus Moor. See, I don't do that versus thing. I don't. You a Moor? I'm a Moor. How you use Moor? I'm with that. It don't matter, man. Muslim. I think it's very destructive to make terminology and self-designation a cause to sex trip and intellectually gangbang. Yeah, there's a context in which the way you use more, I'm not. There's a context in which some use it, I'm not that. There's a context in which some use Muslim, but I'm not that.
Just a quick point on the irresponsibleness of using the term and the applicability. What I found too is some of our scholars and even the European scholars who translate ancient Egyptian texts will translate certain words out of the hieroglyphics as Asiatic. So when you're reading those source documents and you see like Pepi I talking about the wandering Asiatics and he's in Kemet, it kind of confuses you if you can't read what the original word is. And the original word in that sense would be Wasichu, which was a follower of Set in that particular region. And because they translate it as Asiatic, it makes it an Asiatic versus Kemet or African thing in your mindset when you're reading the book. But however, when you get the original word and see that the word is not actually Asiatic, Asiatic is the term that that translator placed on it to describe it as he saw it, then you start understanding we got to learn the languages a little bit better in order to get beyond the divisiveness, because language divides us. And I learned that statement from Brother Jabril Muhammad, confused communications breed disunity, and we get that a lot. So that's just one example I just kind of recollect.
What access do we have?
To putting something up?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can put something up. Yeah, real quick. From the laptop?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
From my presentation.
Go ahead.
Well, I can go.
Where's the laptop? Help me out, brother. Help me out. We can do it real quick. Come on. No, it's right there. All we gotta do is plug it up.
Oh, okay, all right, well, it would be anticlimactic. All right, we'll go to the next, well, we do it and then I'll come back to that.
Next question, we'll come back to it as we do it. Go ahead, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Brother Wesley, true. In the student enrollment, it says God of the universe, right? The Asiatic black man is the God of the universe. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't just regulate our greatness to the planet Earth. In your book, the Book of God, and in other writings that you've elaborated on civilizations on Mars that were built by the original man that have similar to what it is that you presented today in terms of Kushadweepa and the surrounding civilizations and the correlation between them. Could you touch on that a little bit more, brother, in terms of the civilizations on Mars and the correlation to planet Earth?
Well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, actually his teacher, Master Farad Muhammad, you know, his teaching was just peculiar, brothers and sisters. It was, from our standards, very weird. You know, this man had the nerve to say, again, he wasn't content with saying the black man was God. I said, you know what? There's some of them black gods on Mars. It gives us a description, say there's a civilization on Mars. It sounds, I guess, for those you non-New Agers, that may sound ridiculous. I elaborated on that topic in my book, the Book of God, for a very particular reason. Unarguably, the most fantastic claim on Honorable Elijah Muhammad is that there's a black civilization on Mars. And so I thought, well, if the most fantastic claim, fantastic as in seemingly outlandish, not fantastic as in great, the seemingly most outlandish of his claims, if that proves to be supported by actual empirical evidence, then you just got to give this man the benefit of the doubt on this other stuff. If his most outlandish claim proves to be empirically defensible, you need to be way more reserved in your condemnation and mock of his teaching. And as a matter of fact, there is overwhelming evidence of not just life on Mars, but civilization on Mars. You know, the whole controversy, everyone has seen the face, so-called face on Mars. And there's been a lot of controversy on more recent photos of the Cydonia complex and whether the face proved to be a natural land mass or not, or whether it was artificial. In the more recent photos, it was hoped that that controversy will be answered. For those who may not be aware, Viking Orbiter, Mars probes sent out in the 70s photographed an area of Mars, sent back a picture of a face, or what looked like a face, and when it was analyzed, artistically, digitally enhanced, and scientifically examined, it was shown, that examination of those 1970 images demonstrated that it was a face with eyes, eyeball, lip, a helmet, and a tear. And in the general area, there was what seemed to be a pyramid complex, a complex of pyramids. And some writers, science writers, even went so far as to connect the so-called face and pyramid complex with Kemet. Well, of course, the question has always been, do those images show what we think they show? And so the plan was always to send more satellites, re-image the area, and will you communicate something to me? Before we communicate? Huh?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Re-image the area with better imaging techniques and put it to rest. Either it was an artificial construct or it's natural. The most recent photos was from the European Space System in 2004. And the photos that were released were touted as proof that they were natural. The face on Mars controversy dead. Come to find out that 2 photos were taken. The one that was released was purposely distorted for their own admission. And the unreleased, subsequently released, confirmed the conclusion of the study of the 1970s photo that the mathematics suggested this structure can be nothing but an artificial construct. And so you have an face on Mars, big face, eyes, pupils, lips, teeth, and a tear. What seems to be a tear coming down the eye. Somebody put it there. And the image isn't of a white man. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the black man on earth is the God of the universe. Those on Mars, those responsible for the so-called face on Mars, their God is a black man here on earth. It's a God here. And there's evidence that Mars was the satellite to the earth prior to the creation of the moon. And that the process that created the moon, the explosion that created the moon, damaged the existing satellite Mars. And it's been suggested that the face with the tear, can't use geomorphic because geo means earth, martiomorphic. The geography, the landscaping evidence from the photos we have of Mars indicate that it was impacted by an explosion. And the impact site seems to be related to the positioning of the face on Saddam. And maybe that tear, being that the face was positioned on an impact site, and so whatever civilization there was at the time of the explosion was deeply impacted by the explosion debris. And so maybe that tear was a message to Earth or memorial for maybe a Holocaust. This is speculation, but what isn't speculation is that the objective, empirical evidence demonstrates that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's seemingly most fantastic claim. As crazy as it sounds, there's a black man on Mars. There's a black civilization on Mars. But there is objective, empirical evidence that at the very least, shut your mouth till you do a little more study, till the verdict is out. Now granted, I would be disingenuous if I suggested that in the scientific community, the verdict has been rendered one way or the other. The verdict isn't out. And I don't see them in the near future with all of the evidence coming out and saying, yeah, publicly, Elijah was right. There's Negroes on Mars. But the evidence is overwhelming. And at the very least, if the evidence suggests we have to pause before making mock the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's most fantastic claim, then don't be so quick to mock or dismiss any other aspect of what that man taught. Now, what I wanted to do, yes, push it down and go fast at the very end. No, keep going. Right there, right back. Right there, that one right there. Brother Ali introduced an important evidence to this discussion on Asiatic. Because indeed, I remember my dear brother, Bobby Hemmett. We are brothers. We were in Atlanta together. And I remember, because the whole Asiatic discussion came out, I remember one time he read something about, these miserable Asiatics. Because one of the common translations from the Kemetic sources in reference to the people of the desert, the Set people of the Eastern Desert, it was translated miserable Asiatics. And so, Brother Bobby, bless his heart, read this and he said, oh, this is amnesty. Y'all say y'all Asiatic. And here the black Egyptians, talking about these foreign, miserable Asiatics. Well, not only, Brother Ali is correct, Asiatic is a Western term. It's not an exact translation, but it refers to people in the Eastern Desert. It specifically designated people in the Eastern Desert east of the Nile. But what's most important is these are the miserable Asiatics of whom they spoke. The black Arabians, who I was going to introduce you to. But the miserable Asiatics are these black Arabians. So even if miserable Asiatic is an appropriate translation, what you have are derogatory terms of an intercultural conflict. Black Commissions referring to black Easterners. So, well, you're not more blacker than me because you call yourself Commission and I call myself Asiatic. Even if you want to restrict Asiatic to that context, you get no black points. So these so-called miserable Asiatics are black, so-called Asiatics.
Brother Ruben. You next, Brother Ruben.
Peace, brother. I want to know what is your stance on nationality and the need to build a nation and the returning of our birthrights?
My stance?
Yeah.
I'll take the latter first. My birthright is very critical. And we got to get this birthright thing right. But my birthright is gone. Whether I'm here, whether I'm in Africa, whether I'm in Europe, my birthright is gone. That's right. And if I don't get my birthright right, then it doesn't matter what my citizenship card says. Now, all things being real, we need a nation. Now, obviously, I am trying hard to do what I can to establish the nation envisioned by Master Muhammad and introduced to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I think until whatever we claim as our nation, whether we claim black more, whether we claim American, non-American, at this point, because let's be real, I'm not likely to get 25 states or some states in American government financing it for 25 years any sooner than you are going to get real sovereignty here in the United States of America. Let's just keep it real. Both of us have goals and both of us have a program that we can work to, and I support that effort, and to the extent that it is in harmony with the paradigm that I'm reaching for, the paradigm outlined by Master Muhammad, I'm with that. If there's conflict, well then we have to see if we can resolve it and either converge our agendas or just recognize at some point they're going to diverge for right now. But right now, our communities aren't right. Because individually we're not right. And see, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We are allergic to religion. I understand that, it's cool. Teach his own. But I don't care what you call it. The way we live as individuals, whether we Muslim, Moors, Zulus, Afrocentrics, the way we live will preclude there ever being more sovereignty, preclude there ever being a hereafter for us, preclude there ever being anything other than a destroyed, scattered communities. And so, yeah, man, we gotta do right. We gotta live right. And, you know, because we're so used to doing wrong for so long, yeah, we were born in it and shaped by it. But what that means is it takes more than just us learning something at some lecture. That just doesn't do it.
There you go.
Islam isn't a religion, but Islam was given as a religion, as a crutch, because we are sick people. And we need medicine. We don't walk right. We need a crutch. And so, yeah, I understand that the 42 negative confessions of Kemet were not the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments said, thou shalt not. Yes, they were extracted from the 42 negative commandments. I understand that. The 42 negative commandments had us saying, no, I did not do that. I did not do that. But they say, we need the 10 Commandments. Because we need to be told, don't do that. Because few of us can stand in the mirror and say, I did not do that. I did not do that. We need to be told, look, don't do that. We claim Maya, but we don't live Maya. Maya is ready. Maya is religious. I know you're allergic to the term, but just indulge me. Because Kemet was religious. It was cultic. It wasn't just some abstract spirituality.
Right. Right. That's true.
Who did the priests give service to? A statue in the cellar. That they went through all of these rituals to open the mouth to call the deity's essence into it. They put food before it, clothed it with finery, and they were dead serious. Come on, man, that's religious. That's not spirituality. Not in the sense that some of us are trying to use it. Right. So if you want to be anti-religious, you just anti-black. Woo! There's nowhere you're going to go in Asia, the earth, and find black people that didn't have religion.
That's absolute truth.
Nowhere. So I say that to say that, you know, the whole thing of nationality, for me, it's important, but it's not at the top of my agenda. It just isn't. And so because it's not, I'm not going to, your nationalistic ideas, we can build on it, but I'm not going to argue with you on it. That's cool, brother. Even if aspects of your nationalist agenda may conflict with mine. It's just not serious right now. We got a community problem. And it's based on individual problems. And this is why my focus is on the truth of God, because again, it's my mantra. We can't do life right until we get God right. So we got to get God right so we can get our individual lives right. When we get our individual lives right, we get our communities right. Then we can start talking about a nation. Before that, I don't want to be in that nation. I don't care what you call it.
I want to say something.
Real quick on that point before Brother Ruben goes, I just want to add that I think it's close to what we were talking about earlier with the word Asiatic. It's your concept of what you're actually approaching. And a lot of people, from what I found, because I deal in, dealing with the contracts and other things in respect to what we call the erupting desire to reclaim nationality and birthrights, if it's associated with Prophet Noble Drew Ali or other forms of sovereignty, is what the brother is saying. Our concepts of what it means to be a nation are thwarted. And until we get self-governance right in our own individual selves and properly use the corresponding principles of spirituality in those dominions, it's all for naught. And we do need a movement for original peoples globally that deals with the political nature of what we call our denationalization, but dealing with the laws of cause and effect. We denationalized ourselves by our behaviors and our misappropriation of certain laws and principles, universal principles. So it's only when we reclaim those properly that we're going to get back to it.
Peace, good night to everyone. I wanted to find out the term Amaru, where that term comes from, and also with the history y'all been like digging up as far as Islam goes. I wanted to know where does Sufism lie within this history that y'all have found? Like what era, for say, Sufism came about, or have you found that, or are you still searching?
Yeah, I'll touch on that first question because that was one of the things I did want to go over tonight. The use of the term in its cognitive form through the consonant letters in the various alphabets, Meru, Amiru, of those sort. And it's found in the Indus civilizations, the Asiatic civilizations, and in the African civilizations, from what I found, that for some reason there was a use of these particular consonant letters in the Sanskrit, in the so-called Asiatic languages, and in the hieroglyphics. In Egypt, I found that Mure meant a personification of Re. Re being the head deity of the pantheon, usually denoted by the symbol of an eye. And Re being the head of the Ennead, to be More in the mind of the Kemites, as I've studied it, is to be a personification of Re, or God in person. And they would usually denote that the pharaoh was More and Amun, or Amun-Re, which is significant to me because they dealt with the manifest God and the unseen God, Amun-Re. So they were dealing with the dualistic nature of man in respect to how I learned it from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that we are gods in person. And when he was asked about spirituality, he said that the spirit is subject to us and we are not subject to the spirit. And the only thing out there that you are talking about is the righteous mind. So our people merged in a scientific way those principles to express who they were in Egypt. Amaru is a word that is found in the Aksum period in Ethiopia. They spelled it a little different, A-H-M-R. It's also the cognitive of Indra in the Indus civilization. Indra was, when he talks about the Dweepas, Mount Meru was the place where Indra had his seat. And also, in ancient Ethiopia, you find the term Meru. It was constantly used. The 18th dynasty used it with the Amarna. You get the same term where you get the terms in Arabic, Amir. So it was a term that was used. I've even found it in the Quran in certain surahs. In Surah Bana Israel, I believe it's the 52nd verse, and one of the other surahs related to the creation of man, and that term is used. So it was a term that we've used, and I think it was a borrowed consonant root that transposed time. The Phoenicians used it, called themselves the Amaru people. In South America, the Inca used the term to denote the head, Tupac Amaru. Like I said, I showed the slide where we found it in North America at the American Indian Museum. They have the glyphs in the Libyan Arabic that was written. So, I mean, I knew that was important in history. And I wanted to give more on that. We'll give more on that at another time, but we got some other DVDs on that. But that's what I saw. More was an ancient term that meant the personification of Re, or God. And Re was symbolized by the eye, which meant the receiver of light. And the body is light, but it's the corporal light, as we talked about earlier, the personification of light. The black melanated carbon body is light. Okay, so that's what I saw in the use of it, and it became a term that we kept over different epochs that other people would call us, like the Greeks and Romans. They would use that term. And I'll bow out on the second part and let Brother True come in on either one of those.
Your specific question regarding Sufism was?
The reason why I asked is because to me, studying Elijah Muhammad's info, it seems that to me, Sufism and what Elijah teaches is, I'm seeing similarities.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Except we have to qualify it. We, historians of religion, have to qualify. Sufism isn't monolithic. There's some Sufism that is similar, and there's some Sufism that is not. So we have to be more specific with what articulation of Sufism are we talking about. Clearly, the grand sheikh of Sufis, Ibn al-Arabi, he had a theosophical system, a Sufi system, which is remarkably similar to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. But his Sufism was very evolved. He was a medieval writer. Earlier Sufi writers did not have a lot of what we find in Ibn al-Arabi. So we have to be clear on whose Sufism are we talking about. All Sufism isn't the same. There is Sufic trends that absolutely bear witness to our teachings. In fact, the great, though tragic, Al-Hallaj, one of the most famous and tragic 10th century Sufis, he was killed, crucified, a state crucifixion, because he knocked on his master's door one day. And his master said, "Who goes there?" And he answered, "Ana al-Haq. I am God." And he was killed, but they said the real reason he was killed was because he violated the code. It wasn't that Ana al-Haq was a theological error, because Sufis participated, or that's at least co-signed, his state execution. And it wasn't because his declaration that he is God was a Sufi heresy. It's because it was a violation of the rules of esotericism. You can't be running around the streets of Baghdad saying, "I'm now Haq." You are God. So, yeah, Al-Hallaj could have been, sound like he was reciting some lessons. But not every Sufi articulated their Sufism like that. So, I'm just, as an academic, I have to qualify. I'm sorry?
Around what period or dates or so you would say?
Oh, who? Al-Hallaj was in the 10th century. Died around 900 and something. I don't have this exact date. Ibn al-Arabi was medieval 13th century. And there is much in Sufism that is helpful to, or may be helpful to us in understanding the teachings a little better. And also, there's much in Sufism that we can understand better by looking at it through the eyes of the teachings of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Because, you know, we read Halad saying, Anal Haq. We understand. You know, others who read this, they're like, oh, whoa, he was wild.
Right.
But we just speaking of, I'm God. All right, that's a bet.
Right.
We understand that. So I think, yes, we can actually bring light to a lot of what's in the sources by us approaching the sources and discussing the sources from the perspective of the teachers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And this is the reason I want to say this. You know, Sufism, Gnosticism, all of the sacred texts, all of them are pieces of what I call the puzzle of God. And all of them are equally valuable pieces. I'm sorry, the Quran, for a certain stage in our life and development, especially when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad introduced us to it, it's sufficient to get us to do, it's sufficient on a number of levels. On some levels, it's insufficient. For example, if what our goal is to have a thorough knowledge of God, well, the Quran is not sufficient for that. By itself, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so I say, you need the pyramid text for that as much as you need the Quran. You need the Quran. Those are wrong who say all you need are the pyramid text. You need the Quran too. And you need the Gospels. You need the Bible. You want a thorough understanding of God? Well, that's a piece you can't leave out. I know you want to throw the Bible in the trash, but that's fine. But that's a critical piece of the puzzle of God that you're not going to have. So all of these are equally critical pieces, but the point I want to make is, you know, if, dear brother, I hand you a bag, a plastic bag, with 1,000 puzzle pieces in it. Every piece you need to put that puzzle together is in the bag. I hand it to you. Hey, brother, put that puzzle together. It's in a plastic bag. 1,000 pieces. You think you can put it together? With time? But there's something missing, isn't it? You are more optimistic than I don't have the, you know, 1,000. I'm not talking about, you know, I have a 6-year-old son, not the puzzle that he was putting the big blocks. I'm talking about the small pieces. We may be able to see where some of the colors are congruent, the edges in, but there's something missing, isn't it? That will really facilitate us putting that puzzle together, right? What's missing? The picture box. See, we have the image. We know what it's supposed to look like. Then we can put these pieces together. The picture box is the supreme wisdom of Master Farad Muhammad. With the teachings of Master Farad Muhammad, all of this makes sense, and we don't have to fudge facts, which we are really guilty of in the Afrocentric community. Often. We fudge facts because the facts that, as we encountered them, really don't fit the paradigm that we want.
Right.
But we don't have, all of it makes sense. The reason we fudge facts, you know, there's some pieces, they look like there's some color, you know, coordination here, but, you know, maybe if I push it a little more, but if you have to push it a little more, then it doesn't fit. If it was a puzzle, you just put it together and the right pieces fit together easily. If you have to help it a little bit, then it's not the right fit. With the picture box, then we can eliminate that. because we know how this thing is to come together. And because so many of our scholars did a great job and worked with an enormous amount of material, but they lacked the picture box and couldn't put it all together. And I submit to you that the picture box, the teachings of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it makes all of it fall into place, and you don't have to fudge. You don't have to distort the facts on the ground. I know I went off on a tangent, brother. My apologies, but I hope I answered, at least approached your question on Sufism.
We'll take 2 more questions. 2 more questions and we're done.
Peace and blessings to all the guys present, and also to your households. Travel safe tonight. I truly feel fed, don't get me wrong, but in the midst of my meal, you took away my plate. Now, with that being said, is it going to be a possibility for us to set up another forum in which that one of you can speak during that time period? That we can actually get through more than a third of the slides? And also, in the interim, I bought your DVDs, so which DVD would best cover the information that you were going over today?
The Origin of Islam and the End of Ghetto Scholarship.
Okay. And with the other ones, in which order should they be watched to get a better edification?
Oh, no, it's to your liking. They are not in a set like that. One is not a prerequisite for the other. I'm sorry. One is not a prerequisite for the other, so there's no particular order. Just as your liking, dear brother.
One more question.
Islam.
Peace,
big bro.
Peace, yeah.
I just want to make a statement, a real quick statement. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I am a past Grand Sheikh of the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'm here representing the teachings of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali.
True indeed.
I'm a Sheikh and an adept in the Moorish Science Temple of America. What, the brother already knows where I'm going with this. But what I want to say, and what I want to do is bear witness that what Prophet Noble Drew Ali actually taught regarding the truth of God and man and the nature of God and man is exactly what the brother is speaking on and exactly what he teaches. We have no variance, we have no difference in that understanding with what Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught, the founder of the Moorish movement, and what the brother is teaching, and what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. My teachers in the Moorish Science Temple of America told me personally that in their opinion, and this was before I went through the Adept Chamber of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Third Heaven, they told me personally that after the conflict in 1929 and then the subsequent breakdown of the Moorish movement during that time, that from that time to the present, the most accurate teaching that the Prophet taught in the Adept Chamber about the nature of man and mankind and God came out of the Supreme Wisdom. Secondly, some of you know, the brother said about Supreme Wisdom, a number of us represent a faction in the Moorish Science Temple of America and connected with the Moorish movement that got our initial training right here in the streets of New York at a law school.
That's what's up. True indeed.
So our initial training came from these 120 lessons from Supreme Wisdom and set us on a particular path. And we note a distinct difference between those of us that had that initial training that are now in the Moorish movement. That allows us to bring order out of chaos in the sense of seeing where we connect more so than what divides us. And that's what's needed in this movement. So I'll just, again, you know, I feel blessed to be here, brother. You already know, I'm gonna ride with you wherever I see you. You already know what it is.
So, no, I appreciate you traveling, brother Sharif.
Yes, sir.
It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. Peace.
Peace.